The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Without further ado, as I always get to announce him, over the years, I know no stauncher fighter in the quest for who is Barack Obama than this man, Dr. Jerry Corsi, Harvard PhD. He's become a good friend. We've met in Washington, D.C. and spoken. And we're going to talk about the Ebola outbreak. But I do want to come back to, I've been kicking this idea around, Dr. Corsi, about trying to, sometime this summer, and I've been talking to the people like yourself who I have most respect for, what are the odds that we could ever have an academic gathering of investigators into the life of Barack Obama and to come to some kinds of conclusions or at least a set of questions that we could present to the general public? And, we've talked about the Trump angle on this, and I know you worked on that angle. Or now I'm down to, could it simply be done on the Internet with technology? But I just want your overall views of that, by the way. First of all, good morning and thank you, but then your overall views of that question.
Peter, good to be back with you. I think at some point or other it's going to be possible. I think it's going to be a continuing inquiry. Most likely after Barack Obama leaves office, and there's not quite the press circling the wagons around him, then that's when we're going to more likely find the truth, I believe. I think until that point it's going to be more, there's always a strong contingent that no matter what you say about Barack Obama is going to defend him.
Mm-hmm.
And that contingent has not gone away, largely because, this is one presidency that can't sustain really detailed investigative analysis, and the mainstream media has been, AWOL
Horrible.
on trying to really investigate. If this had been Sarah Palin, the New York Times hires 20 people, and they camp around Sarah Palin's home in Alaska to get anything they can find. But with Barack Obama, the media doesn't care to investigate because they, any competent reporter knows there's tremendous holes in Barack Obama's background, and the story has not yet been told.
So the expectation of having you and the other 20 men and women that I respect, I've talked to Mark Crowley about it, about doing it on the Internet, doing it by Skype or by doing it by, all the technical abilities, and that the workaday man or woman could simply be part of it by sitting in an audience in front of their computers and watching people present papers on Frank Marshall Davis, on Vernon Jarrett, that list of people that swirl around him, Bernardine Doran. We mentioned, Bill Ayers and Cleta, El Mansour, the people that you've talked about, or what happened in Indonesia or didn't happen in Indonesia, and why these different names have shown up, and about Obama Sr., and, we get on the list of these things, the document investigators, David Axelrod. I mean, I got a list of people I'd like to have someone present a paper on.
Right.
And that's, I guess, that's what I'm asking.
Well, I mean, it's doable, Peter. I just think that the way the news cycle works, it's going to be relegated to history pretty soon.
Yeah.
And, today we're still finding out information from CIA secret operations under Allen Dulles in the 1950s.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're still learning information about Mossadegh and the overthrow in Iran. We're still learning about Guatemala and the overthrow in Guatemala, and the Arbenz and the connections between that and the Kennedy assassination. I wrote about that.
Yeah, I know.
Extensively in my book on who really killed Kennedy. The secret history of the United States
amazing
is one that, especially since the post-World War II era,
I agree.
is one that's going to be continuously researched because so much of the truth has been hidden from the American people.
I'm currently...
The CIA and other organizations like the NSA have engaged in systematic lying, and the American people are, today increasingly dummied down so that your average voters for Obama, certainly in 2012, really didn't care where he was born as long as they, everybody had their hand out. Do I get my Obama phone? Do I get my food stamps?
Sure,
Do I get my earned income tax credit?
Health care.
Do I get my health care? Do I, Am I going to get my women's rights in terms of reproductive freedom and all these other issues that the Democrats have used as wedge issues to slice and dice the population into interest groups that will vote Democratic regardless of who Obama is or what was proved about his eligibility.
Boy, that's good thought. I mean, I'm reading. For some reason, there's so much that has fallen into the market right now that's wonderful. And one book is entitled "The Secret History of the CIA." That
right.
I'm wading through this book, but it's everything I've always read before, just brought more concisely together. And who the ouster of the Shah and
right.
The
well,
and the overthrow.
Very good book.
Yeah.
Very good book I recommend by Stephen Kinzer on the Dulles brothers called
Yes.
The Brothers.
I know. I've read that book, and I've
which
read.
I think does an exceptionally good job of bringing forward the covert history of the CIA under the Eisenhower administration and how the Dulles brothers were really fundamentally responsible for the Cold War and the lies told to the American people about overthrows in Iran and Guatemala.
Oh, yeah.
The beginning, Lumumba in Africa. And
Patrice Lumumba, yeah.
And these were actions the United States government has taken with the CIA. I mean, I've maintained for years that the best thing we do with the CIA and with the NSA would be close them both down because they are both intrinsically secret operatives and they engage in disinformation. Another great book that I think WND published this past year was Disinformation by Pacepa, who is the highest-ranking KGB officer ever from Romania. He headed the KGB. And the book is entirely about how the intelligence agencies specialize in disinformation to rewrite history and to influence populations. It's still going on today.
I'm stunned by the I guess what was Jefferson's patriotism, the last vestiges of a scoundrel, but how the Dulles brothers played people, and John Foster's brother Alan.
Right.
Between the two of them, they were really connected into the Bush family with Prescott Bush.
Right. Well, the secret history of the United States is that, the 20th century was that Wall Street, through the Bush family, through the Dulles family, Brown Brothers Harriman, Cromwell and Sullivan, law firm in New York, financed the rise of Hitler.
They were certainly involved.
More than that, they were responsible for producing the economic wherewithal that Hitler needed in order to gain power and to rearm Germany. And it wasn't until after Hitler took over as chancellor that Cromwell and Sullivan began to pull out. Right to the end of the war, Alan Dulles was working in Bern, Switzerland, working with Bormann to reposition Nazi loot for the post-war rise of Germany and the EU.
The one interesting, I've read extensively about it. It doesn't make me an expert, but the surrender in Italy, when Alan Dulles accepts the surrender.
Yes, Operation Sunrise
of the German. Yeah, and there was an SS general by the name Wolf, General Wolf.
He was a major criminal from Auschwitz.
Yes,
and killed 300,000 people.
And Alan Dulles accepts his surrender.
Yes, and gives them special terms to be free after the war.
And they're so afraid of the communists.
Right.
And so
we took the entire Reinhard Gehlen Gestapo organization.
They used them as cops.
And made them as part of the West German intelligence operation at the end of World War II.
Made them into the police.
And a pillar of the CIA.
And these guys, they're so afraid. In northern Italy is the industrial part of Italy, and so they're the Communist Party always works through the industrial unions, and so Alan Dulles. It's called The Secret Surrender. That's the title of the book, and it's a fascinating book. And he accepts a surrender. Well, he's certainly is not. He's not. He's not. The deal was nobody surrenders unless they surrender to all of us, and there had to be. Stalin's guy had to be there. Churchill's guy had to be there. Roosevelt's guy had to be there. De Gaulle wanted a guy to be there. But he simply accepts this surrender, and then because of the fear of the CP, they leave the SS soldiers. These are brutal,
Right.
and they leave them as cops. They
Well,
become they become a
also,
police force.
in that Operation Sunrise, Dulles excluded the Russians, even though they were allies.
Totally
So they
excluded
did not. And if you really study Operation Sunrise, the surrender occurred only within a few days of the surrender of Germany anyway.
That's right.
So Dulles, bargained away for the Gestapo head of that army in Italy, and also for the Gestapo troops who participated in that army, complete freedom, not facing war crime prosecutions, really in return for nothing.
And what to play both sides, Stalin, who's already a paranoid,
Right.
and he's given Georgy Malenkov and these guys are telling him, see, they accepted a surrender without you being there.
Well,
and not that you had to trigger any fear in Joseph Stalin.
No.
But
well, the Dulles brothers were doing everything they could to create a post-war world in which we incorporated in the United States as much of the Nazi elements as we could.
They saved them.
And that we then propped up Germany and advanced along. Remember, the Dulles brothers were prime founders of the Council on Foreign Relations.
And they were CFR guys.
Globalists.
Sure.
They were internationalists. They did not believe in nation states. They wanted a corporate world ruling, the future. They are, in a large part, the Dulles set the framework for what we have been today with the EU. And the march that we're continuing to go down to abandon state sovereignty was a reaction to, the anti-communism of the Dulles, the feeling that Germany had risen twice and Germany would only succeed if it could rule Germany, but do it peacefully at the head of the EU.
They knew they were going to come again.
Well, and then the creation of the NSA with all of its secret, gathering of information traces again back to the Dulles brothers' desire to create a covert CIA, which Harry Truman was desperately opposed to.
They did away with it. That's right. It was Bill Donovan, and they recreated it. It was called
the OSS was recreated as the CIA.
Absolutely.
And even in its first years, Truman did everything he could to make it a covert agency.
Exactly.
In fact, when Jack Kennedy was killed, Truman, within days, wrote an editorial blaming the CIA for the death and demanding an investigation of the CIA. It's a largely ignored editorial because Truman, from the beginning, suspected that this was the Dulles brothers. This was a covert U.S. action that was a coup d'etat. It was following the same model that the CIA had used in Iran, the lying ouster of Mossadegh in 1953.
Overthrow him, bring back the Shah.
And then the Guatemala in 1954, 57.
Overthrow Arbenz.
Yeah. And, of course, they assassinated Armas and blamed it on a patsy in Guatemala about 1957. That was the model, essentially, for the Lee Harvey Oswald JFK assassination. That's what I write in. That's increasingly the documentation's available in the archives.
They're fascinating people because when they're deporting people, and when they take Carlos Marcello, they deport him. They deport him to Guatemala.
Right. Well, he was not. Marcello was not Italian.
He was an illegal. He was an illegal alien.
Yeah,
and that's right. He absolutely was. That's wonderful.
And the mob. It was the Kennedy family going against really the Eastern mob. They had made a pact with the Western mob when the McClellan Committee hearings were going after Hoffa. But it was a revenge between the CIA for firing Allen Dulles over the Bay of Pigs. When Jack Kennedy would not fight the CIA's lying wars. He wasn't going to engage in Vietnam. He didn't want to fight in Laos. He knew the CIA was pushing for a test case of its guerrilla warfare techniques and its new military it wanted to devise that was different from the World War II military. And Kennedy was not going to be lied to and led into down the primrose path by, the Maddox incident and all these other things that were being concocted by the CIA to be a pretext for going to war in Vietnam.
Yeah, I mean, frighteningly.
Suharto is another one. The Suharto overthrow is another CIA operation, and Obama's at the center of that because Obama, brought back into Indonesia by his mother and stepfather right at the time when the Suharto-Sukarno revolution is occurring, and easily 500,000 communists and Christians are being killed in Indonesia as the Muslims, backed by the CIA and Suharto, take over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's a chapter that's not been told.
But, you know, when we talk this way, and maybe because we're both driven into this stuff, and it really is an untold story. There seems to be, Dr. Jerry Corsi is with us. We're going to talk about Ebola here in a moment, but it seems to be that there's this, and when we talk about, there are these people called court historians, and,
right.
and there's a theme that comes through history that says, victors write history. The vanquished do not write history. The victors write history, and that becomes court history, court historians who will lionize the monarch.
Right.
And yet there's a whole other part of this. And when you begin to speak about it, you're either, you're attacked for speaking about it, that you're not a patriot, or you're not this, or you're not that. And you can see it with the Obama issue, that if we speak about, and I have no clue, by the way, who Barack Obama truly is, then you're a racist. If you speak about what the United States did to overthrow a duly elected, and this is in Iran, and this is in the middle of the height of the Cold War, and they throw these people out of office, and they bring back the Shah. And the Shah's father is a really weird character. And the guys there, the pro-Nazis, and they bring these guys back simply because they want to be able to do business with the oil business. And they bring in, and this is the beginning of Aramco, that's Arab American oil, and it all stems into these same interesting people that seem to reappear again. And I just wonder, Jerry, and what ultimately everybody will do or can do with this. And maybe there'll be, some semblance of a radio show, 25 years from now or 30 years from now, and there'll be, some idiot like me and with a good guest like you, and they'll be talking about, there were people that really did know that Barack Obama wasn't who he said he was, but they were silenced, just like you're talking about. There were people who spoke up against what the CIA was doing, and what was done to those people. Many of them had very, very tragic endings to their lives.
Well, it depends on how. First of all, everything we're talking about in terms of the CIA is all on the public record. You just have to go find it, and it's been written about extensively. But we're raising a whole generation of people who don't read.
Yeah, but people who do this, who do what I had a conversation with a friend of mine over lunch, and we were talking about, and I said, about Cuba and the creation of Batista and almost helping create Fidel Castro, and how who's written a book, and it's actually very good. Mar Lansky's Daughter.
Okay.
And it's wonderful. I got a copy of it, and I got 10 friends that can give me the book when you're done. But it's called The King's Daughter, and it's written, and she goes to Cuba all the time as a little girl because of Mar Lansky. Right. And she, I don't want to wreck the book for anybody, and she's going to be on the radio show with us, but she's come out now after all of these years and written a book about her father.
Right.
They're all in bed together. The CIA, organized crime, the government in Cuba, and they simply run that country. That country's their country.
Well, that's right. And, the future of this depends upon if government states continue to amass the power they're amassing and are not resisted, then the future is an Orwellian future of a government-created history in which only the approved version is going to be permitted to be taught.
We're watching it now with Common Core.
Yeah.
They're rewriting, and I've said this all the time, Winston Smith's job was to rewrite history in the Ministry of Truth. And we see these moments, and this is what makes you, I think, such a great guest and such a tough guy. That I can't imagine what hasn't bbeen said about you. But what's really interesting is, as the smoke clears and the dust settles, guys like you were right.
Yeah.
When we come focusing in on this, who is Barack Obama? When we first met, 8-9 years ago, when we first started this, my God. You were the end of the trail. There were people that threatened to boycott advertisers over at KHOW if I would have you on the show. I'm not making that up.
No, I know it's true.
And,
well, they couldn't stand the truth is the problem.
Yeah, well, I think it's part of it. Or this, don't have that racist back, don't have this guy, or he's that guy, he's this guy, and all you were trying to ask the musical question was, we have a POTUS that nobody knows who he is.
Well, this should have been the question asked by every journalist going into the 2008 election. The problem is that, again, we're producing a state-determined journalism. That because journalists with the major outlets do not want to be denied access at a press conference.
We're watching it here right now in Denver. We have street vendors who have been pushed away by the Colorado Rockies, and none of the major media outlets will come near the story. We're doing it, but the point was, you lose access to the clubhouse. You lose access to their, I guess they have their white wine, that drippy cheese, and those little cracker parties, and you don't get invited to play golf,
or you don't get the front row at the press,
or
you don't get invited on the press bus,
or you don't get to go play golf.
You don't get the access
to
the interview. Like, if Bill O'Reilly had not started sucking up to Obama, he never would get the interviews he got.
Jerry, and we're close to a pause, and I'm going to ask you to stay with me, but believe me when I say this, that does anyone not believe that Barack Obama was not given every question in advance before that Super Bowl halftime or pregame interview when we watched Mr. O get his interview with Barack Obama? Does anyone in their right mind not think Obama knew every question in advance?
Of course
he did.
And these are staged events. That's what people don't realize, is that instead of, if you go back and you look at the way Hitler was staged, Hitler was, first of all, not a German, should not have been chancellor.
He was an Austrian, right?
He's Austrian.
Yeah. Let me just, I'm told something here, and I have to do it. I'm going to have you back tomorrow because we have Tony Fabian coming up, and this is the only time he has to talk to us.
Sure, that's
about
fine,
Eric
no problem.
Jerry, let me, actually, we're good, kid. You just call him. All right, I'll talk to you in the morning. Thanks, Doc.
Okay.
All right,
sure,
he's one of my favorites, Dr. Jerry Corsi. We never got to Ebola.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.